the strange habits of extremely frugal people, and why they might be smarter than the rest of us. I first heard about Maya on a quiet Tuesday evening. My friend described her as the kind of person who lived like she had nothing. A tattered couch from Craigslist, a bare-bones apartment, no flashy clothes, no subscriptions, yet had quietly amassed hundreds of thousands in investments. She wasn't living paycheck to paycheck. She wasn't broke. And she had never even landed a six-figure job. That was the mystery. How could someone who seemed so frugal, almost ascetic, actually be wealthier than many of us chasing bigger paychecks? In a world obsessed with side hustles, early retirement dreams, and flashy displays of success, Maya's path seemed radical, but it worked. This isn't the classic avoid shopping sermon. It's a deeper, almost philosophical way of living, a clever, intentional, even quietly rebellious lifestyle. I started to wonder, what are the real habits of extremely frugal people? The ones who don't just scrape by, but quietly build freedom? In stories from around the world, across TikTok and thrift market threads, I began to see the pattern. And what I discovered wasn't boring. It was brilliant. Let's start with the psychology behind frugality, more than just tight budgets. Back in 2008, the shock of the global recession shook millions. People lost jobs, homes, savings. Suddenly, earning big didn't guarantee security, but self-discipline did. Over time, that fear hardened into something deeper, a mindset. In 2024 to 2025, a wave of young adults, especially Gen Z, began embracing frugality not out of desperation, but as a new aesthetic and identity. On social media platforms, #FrugalLiving and #ExtremeBudgeting have become a kind of badge of honor. But this version of frugality isn't about deprivation. It's about control, about saying yes, but only to what matters. For many, like Maya, frugality is freedom. Frugality isn't about being poor, she told me once. It's about being free from the pressure to keep up. Instead of chasing the next big purchase, they delay gratification. They treat money not as a fuel for conspicuous living, but as a tool. They avoid time suckers. It's not just money they save, it's hours. One of the habits almost never mentioned when people talk about frugality, frugal folks avoid anything that will consume time later. Think about it. A fancy dress that needs dry cleaning. A subscription service that demands you log in to remember. A plant that wilts if you skip a week's watering. All of those savings come with invisible time costs. Maya does what she calls decision dieting. Her mornings start the same: overnight oats, black coffee, and a quick walk. No messing around trying to match outfits. No thinking about what to buy for lunch. That means fewer decisions, fewer mistakes, fewer impulse buys. She doesn't own a microwave because she batch cooks every weekend and eats the same breakfast each day. That's 7 decisions gone before 9 a.m. She doesn't need a fancy closet. She doesn't want stuff that demands upkeep. It's not about being cheap. It's about reducing mental clutter, minimizing friction, and maximizing freedom. 2, they monetize hobbies, turn skills into value because earning doesn't have to feel like work. Here's where frugality gets creative. Instead of grinding away at a side hustle for extra cash, extremely frugal people often turn hobbies into value, sometimes even barter value. There's a wave of people on forums and platforms trading guitar lessons for local produce, or dog walking on weekends for free pet food for their own pups. Others give freelance design or tutoring in exchange for studio time or gear. Maya teaches UI/UX design 2 hours a week, not to get paid cash, but to earn free co-working space and equipment. It's a kind of recreational earning. Instead of seeing extra income as a burden, they view it as a playful exchange of time for value. They blur consumption and contribution. More than that, they refuse to view income as only money. Sometimes it's studio time. Sometimes it's meals. Sometimes it's freedom. 3, money as faith. The unspoken beliefs that guides every choice. What sets extremely frugal people apart isn't an Excel spreadsheet. It's a code of beliefs. They don't follow budgets, they follow rules. Maya's mantra, never buy what someone else is throwing away for free. Another friend's rule, if I can't pay cash, I don't need it. These are not financial tips. They're identity statements. Over time, they reshape how a person sees themselves, not as bargain hunters, but as stewards of freedom. Because it becomes identity, there's no internal fight, no wrestling over, should I buy this? The rule says, no. And that's that. Psychologists call this pre-commitment. People who pre-commit don't negotiate with themselves, they act. For frugal people, it's a weapon against impulse, status anxiety, and consumer pressure. 4. Trash becomes arbitrage, the hidden value in what others discard. Maybe the most surprising habit of all, extremely frugal people often treat trash as opportunity. In the expanding world of re-commerce, secondhand sale, repair, reuse, what others label junk becomes value. Maya once spent a single weekend flipping damaged appliances she got for free. She resold the parts and made nearly $500. She learned how to fix small things by watching YouTube tutorials. She doesn't throw packaging away. She saves boxes bubble wrap. She knows someone else might need them. She calls it free currency. Around the world, online marketplaces are booming. Driven by economic pressure and a culture shift towards sustainability, secondhand goods are surging in popularity. For the frugal, this isn't resale, it's resource harvesting. It's seeing value where most people see trash and handling it intelligently. 5. Homes that work like machines. Frugality meets smart design. If you walked into Maya's apartment, you might say it's minimalist. But that would be wrong. It's optimized like a tiny lean machine. Every item has a purpose. The ottoman, hidden storage. The curtains, keep heat or cold in, save on energy bills. The shower timer cuts water heating, costs down by nearly 30% each month. And she isn't alone. Across online communities, people are embracing frugal smart living, passive insulation, small solar panels, gray water recycling, strategic window placement for cooling, reusing items, repurposing, maximizing utility. It's not cheap living, it's efficient living. In a world where energy prices fluctuate and global uncertainty spikes, such design becomes more than eco-conscious. It becomes a hedge. Frugal living here isn't about deprivation. It's about autonomy. It's engineering your environment for sustainability, stability, and freedom. 6. Knowledge as capital. Consuming less, learning more. Here's a quiet truth. Extremely frugal people rarely pay for expensive courses, fancy degrees, or pricey coaches, at least not before they know what they truly need. Instead, they make the most of free resources, public libraries, open source courses from universities, community webinars, free government forums. Maya once taught herself basic tax law through free webinars from her country's revenue authority, enough to handle her own investments and avoid rookie mistakes. She watches documentary-style videos, reads ebooks, listens to audiobooks. For many frugal folks, knowledge becomes a form of currency, a way to avoid bad decisions, expensive mistakes, and impulsive spending. The more they learn, the fewer mistakes they make. And over time, they become more self-reliant, more strategic, more free. Why go through all this trouble? Because for extremely frugal people, the goal isn't to be rich. It's to be free. Maya's aim isn't flashy. She's not trying to buy a mansion. She's trying to shrink her freedom number, the monthly budget she needs to live on. She doesn't need millions to retire early. She just needs fewer dollars. She plans to relocate to a country with lower cost of living, where her modest expenses stretch further. With her investments and minimal lifestyle, she estimates she could live comfortably for decades without a high-paying job. This isn't extreme deprivation. It's strategic leverage. It's refusing to chase status through spending and instead chasing control through choices. In a world where debt, consumerism, and inflation dominate, this path is quietly radical. The truth, the new rich, might be the least flashy. If you saw someone patching an old coat, buying from thrift stores, carrying a reusable bag, and skipping brand name labels, you might think they're broke, but maybe they're not. Maybe they're freer than most. Maybe they've already paid off debt. Maybe they're quietly building real financial independence. Maybe they don't answer to a paycheck, because the habits of extremely frugal people aren't about sacrifice. They're about choice. They're strategic, they're subtle, and they often go unnoticed. In a culture obsessed with more, they choose enough. In a world where consumption screams for attention, they whisper, "I'm fine." Maybe, just maybe, the smartest people are the quietest spenders. Next time you see someone reusing packaging or carrying their own lunch, resist the urge to pity. Instead, ask yourself, maybe they're building something bigger than a bargain. Maybe they're building freedom, because being frugal doesn't have to be boring. It can be clever, it can be calm, it can be powerful. And maybe, in a world of debt, inflation, and uncertainty, it